Yeah, sure.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Howdy.
All right. Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late getting on here. Let's see. See who's with us. Well, okay. Well, in the interest of everyone's time here, we'll open up the meeting and then if people join us, we can acknowledge them. But right now, let's call the Mass Broadband Coalition meeting to order here for 3. We have I'm myself here, Bob Espandola from Fairhaven. And see, when we go through, I think everyone, there's no one new that I see so far. So let me just see if I can get this right. We got David Cole from Westport, Carl Allen from Chelsea, Jonathan Nunes from New Bedford, Peter Chase from Dartmouth, and then Brian Preachers from Gray Bar. Derek Leffert is from Gateway Fiber. So I'm not sure how many more. I know that Bob Dwyer from Bourne is looking to join us. Okay, John Presif is joining us. I don't recall if we've seen him before. I'll give it a second to let him come on. And Brian McCarter was also someone that is in the past has been with us, but he said he's not going to be here, but he's going to follow along with the meeting notes. Hi, Jason. We're just introducing ourselves to each other. Have you joined us before, Jason? I think you're muted.
So
Hey.
I'm sorry, Jason Precythe's name's coming up. This is Rick Pierce from Somerset. I'm on one of the computers in my office, so that's another one of the attorneys here. So it's
Okay.
actually Rick Pierce from Somerset.
No worries. Yeah, I recognized you, and then I was thinking that the name threw me. So, okay. Yeah. So I know that there was that people were interested in the study that Falmouth had done by CPC and maybe talking about that a little bit. Before we get into that much, though, I know New Bedford, the city of New Bedford, has been going through an RFP process, and they, maybe Jonathan, if you could give us an update on that, that'd be helpful. I'm not sure if you have anything recent developments.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the last time I spoke to the group, we did New Bedford went out for RFP, basically looking for a broadband provider to compete with Comcast. I mean, that's the way we worded it. We worked with CTC, which I know a lot of your communities have worked with in the past. And we worked on an RFP that they kind of helped us build, and then we sent it out. We have since taken down the RFP. We did receive 5 potential bidders. One that I think is the big one is Verizon. Verizon did bid on or did put an RFP proposal in. The other couple of other ones I'm not as familiar with, but Ripple Fiber was one. Emirus Innovations, and I can put these names in the chat, but Gene Computer Tech Corporation and Gigeros or something from Massachusetts. So I'll put those in the chat. We're right now at the valuation phase, so we're going to kind of look at each one and figure out how we're going to score each one. We haven't looked up obviously with the way the Massachusetts procurement rules work. We have to evaluate each one independent of any pricing. The way we kind of worded our RFP is we didn't believe the city was going to have any funding necessarily to put up. The city wasn't as concerned about owning the infrastructure as I know some other communities were. So the city worded it as the RFP is going to go out. If we get any funding, if it's any grant funding, we will be happy to pass that off to the relationship. But the city would not be providing any money up front unless we received grant funding or something. But we left it so open-ended that if there was a contribution the city would have to make, we were willing to look into that. So I think basically the starting point is to kind of look at all these providers and figure out which one kind of makes it to the top. Once the money piece is open, which will be done after the bidding process, we'll see if they required any contribution from the city and then kind of negotiations from thereafter. We've talked to Verizon was one that we knew they were going to bid. They did mention they were, obviously being Verizon Fios, I'm assuming. We're curious if they wanted to build out. I think the argument that CTC made, because we weren't sure that they necessarily wanted to come to this area, South Coast in general. Verizon Fios kind of stopped, I believe, in Rochester area and didn't really come down this way. But the other thought was that they may have bid because they don't want any other provider to take up this area. So I haven't read the whole proposal yet. I have it printed, but I want to kind of give them due diligence. Obviously, the other four are still important to look at. But I think knowing that Verizon did have some interest, I think is important for South Coast. So more to come, but we're in that phase right now. So kind of the update from the city.
So the first phase is like a technical qualifications. So
Absolutely.
you're saying whether they're qualified to do the work and what they're offering is what you're looking for. And then if that
Right.
if that box is checked, then you look at the pricing and okay. So some of the providers might be discarded or set aside based on the fact that it doesn't look like a good match before you even find out what okay.
Right.
Like Peter, you have your hands up there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so to kind of piggyback off Verizon for the city of New Bedford so we on our municipal broadband board, we had a representative, one of our board members was employed by Verizon. And she had to resign her seat about 3-4 months ago because she got assigned to a project down here in the South Coast. And so looking at MBI's funding, Verizon got $37 million from them, and Dartmouth, Fall River are both included in that. So our understanding through back channels is that they're looking to build a network from New Bedford to Fall River using a bunch of the funds from MBI and picking up everyone in between. So I don't know if that's going to include Westport and David over there, but I know that's kind of what we've heard on the back end.
Hello?
Someone in the background
Yeah, Betty,
I'm sorry, David.
it's
Okay.
just my wife talking, but I wanted to comment on that. The Verizon is moving into Falmouth and is committing to expand their network to go into broadband and high-speed internet, and largely undercutting the attempt that Falmouth was making to set up its own municipally owned system. And I sent a report to Bob, an excerpt from the report that they've gotten, which describes that. I don't know whether you can share that with others, but it looks to me like Verizon is making a move to try to preserve and expand its market and undercut the efforts of municipalities to set up their own broadband business. And I think this is something we ought to take very seriously.
Okay, yes, that clearly seems to be the case. And so this, let's see, I got something from Brian. Oh, round one winner list. Okay, that's a list of all the communities that received MBI funds in the first round. And
You also got something from me just in the last 20 minutes, the excerpt from the Falmouth report on their, on the Verizon's activity there.
yes, the one that Brian sent over is shows for each grant recipient, whether it's Comcast, Greenfield, Spectrum, and Verizon, who the communities are.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, so I'm not sure what the criteria was for how they selected these communities. And does anybody have knowledge of that? How, say, for example, Verizon, they selected certain communities, including Dartmouth and New Bedford and Fall River, how they went about, what the criteria was?
Well, my understanding was that the gap funding when MBI released, because the city actually tried to, I think I mentioned this before, the city tried to
Yeah.
get gap funding for some of the areas we felt in the city. Our problem with the New Bedford was that everywhere in the city could mostly be accessible to internet. Our argument was that the wiring or the infrastructure is not usable, and it's detrimental to the speeds we were getting. And through Sean Gross's work, he was able to determine that what people are paying for on speed wise aren't what they were getting, and that was our argument. The state didn't accept that at all. They kind of thought that we were going on our own, and we weren't necessarily doing that. We were more so trying to get funding to be able to bring in a private relationship, private partner. But the state outright denied us. So it's interesting that Peter mentioned that Dartmouth, which kind of makes sense that Verizon went for some of their gap funding. We did meet with Verizon before the gap funding process ended, and Verizon pretty much determined based off of the FCC maps that New Bedford really wasn't eligible, and that's why they didn't go for the funding. So New Bedford really hasn't received anything. So it's interesting that the Verizon aspect of that in Fall River and Dartmouth, and that might be why they bid here. Not that they necessarily have the funding, but that it's going to be the whole South Coast at that point.
So Robert has his hand up. Maybe he can shed some light if he knows more about how they went about that.
Our inference, and it is only an inference, is that Verizon was frankly taking a look at where they could identify unserved and underserved areas, and they made the business decision. And again, this is just an inference that they were going to identify those, and if there were enough of them, and they could make runs long enough that were funded with the gap funding, they could pick up a whole bunch of full-paying residential private drops that were in served areas, nominally served by Comcast. And I think that's one of the reasons that they have gone forward in Falmouth. One of the other reasons for Falmouth is that Comcast upped their game tremendously in Falmouth, and all of a sudden they've advertised that we've gone from the minimum, and now everybody's getting 300 in Falmouth over Comcast. So Comcast and Verizon are trying to fight over what they can get is any low-hanging fruit, and certainly anything connected via the gap funding, and they want to leave any of the three companies, for instance, the three approaches that are listed in that CTC report, they want to leave them in the dust. They want to totally outcompete them. I mean, that should be no shock.
Yeah, and so I kind of understand how in locations like Falmouth, where there's been so much work done in this area, and looking at the underserved areas, and that they would go after, and you're far along. I'm guessing communities that are further along with an RFP and trying to make something happen on their own or target areas as well. But that's why I tried to share the screen. Can you see the screen of the grant recipients?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is what Brian sent over that I'm just, so when we look at, say for, I guess the area that most, so Comcast and Verizon are the two that affect most of the people on this call, I think. Or the people that have been participating in these meetings, but so I just not sure. It's not like they've got a whole bunch of contiguous communities. It seems to be spread out. And so it's not like they're trying to get like a backbone that runs through a whole area. They're just, I guess doesn't really matter.
Well, but Falmouth doesn't show up. Oh, yes, it does. Okay. It's down in the bottom one. But that's where this grant of $37 million has gone to Verizon to expand its service in all those towns.
Yeah,
And
they got by far, you can see in the right-hand column that by the numbers there, by far they got the most money.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, I guess it's, yeah, I'm really just not sure of the rhyme or reason, but that is, so those are the communities that are, I imagine like Peter, if Dartmouth was heading towards an RFP, you're probably going to find similar, results to what New Bedford has found.
yeah,
In
Bedford, Fall
Falmouth.
River.
Yeah,
We're kind of in like, we just got our final report there from Entry Point and right now the committee's kind of a little gun shy because obviously if Verizon builds in here, we're not gonna be able to compete with Verizon, Comcast and there's not enough room for 3 broadband providers in town. And so it kind of like, we're almost in a holding pattern now because to see what happens with Verizon. I mean, the other part of it was, the other information we heard about from Verizon through back channels was, they're looking to get rid of all their copper lines. And so I don't know if it has to do also with maybe how many, like maybe they went after communities that they have still a lot of people on the phone system, the old phone system, that they're just looking to dump all their copper lines, all their copper equipment completely. Like, I guess they've gone into other communities where they've overbuilt and they basically told everyone, like, if you're on a copper line, you have to go over to a fiber line because we're no longer, servicing the copper lines at all. And so, and I know that's been a problem in New Bedford is all the copper lines for Verizon, because one guy that works here had Verizon phone service and he was told by them like, no, you should just call Comcast because you're never going to get a better phone connection here because we got all the old copper lines and they're all dying out. So that's probably another reason they want to go after New Bedford is they want to just update all their lines. And so getting any kind of help or any kind of funding for it is, whatever they can do.
yeah. And
Go
ahead, Rob.
Yeah, one of the issues that at least we see, I don't know if it's an issue, but in terms of Verizon expansion, if you look at the towns or kind of around the canal, they already serve Wareham and they already serve Plymouth with FiOS pretty much town-wide. They serve Buzzards Bay on the north side of the canal, or the north and the west side of the canal. They have service that's now extended halfway down through Bourne. You don't know the geography, but it stops at about the northern part of Joint Base Cape Cod. They've promised that they're going to completely use the gap funding to serve all the unserved and underserved in Falmouth by the end of 26, as the grant requires. And then they committed to the MLP people that they would serve the rest of the town after that. And they committed to serve every household. From that, the gap grant, they also are serving Sandwich and Mashpee. So except for 2 big holes in Bourne, in Sagamore area and in kind of the south part of Bourne, Pocasset and Katomet, they pretty much are look like they're expanding a core around the Upper Cape and the South Coast.
What's interesting is I read the report that you sent over to us last night, Bob. Thanks for sending that. And unless I was mistaken, I thought of the different proposals, Verizon's was not what they called ubiquitous, meaning serving every person in the community. That were they one of the ones that said, because the gap funding doesn't require them to do that, right? It's specifically.
Right.
So they're gonna first, even whether in New Bedford was looking for ubiquitous service in their RFP,
Mhm.
that's what they called for. So if Verizon comes in through this gap program and they're only gonna be providing service to the unserved, or underserved, then that's only gonna go so far. I guess
Well,
maybe what they're proposing is, in addition to that, they're also going to fund their own build out to everyone else. That's
They-
The
the
go
report,
ahead.
the report that was circulated says Verizon indicated it intends to eventually build ubiquitously in Falmouth, though this may take several years to complete.
Oh, yeah.
So they've
okay.
indicated their
Mhm.
intention to cover the whole town.
Yeah, okay, not as part of this initial proposal that they've submitted. Okay,
But this is using our taxpayer money to give grant funding to Verizon to expand this service in competition with our municipally owned efforts. I just think we need to be aware of that
Yeah.
and see whether there's anything we can do about it.
yeah,
Well, my committee has instructions from our pretty much, they haven't been fully written down, but instructions from our select board is that the select board has no intention of funding anything or allowing any bonded indebtedness for a municipal-based system. And that the select board wants to encourage Verizon or whomever to go and expand, use whatever grant money to reach served and underserved, and then maybe use that as their middle mile or backbone to serve the rest of the town. And I think our select chair is probably going to be talking to a vice president in Verizon, given the fact that we're more or less surrounded by FiOS service, and finding out what their intentions are to serve those gap areas in Bourne. And then they'll tell us to declare victory. Who knows, they may dissolve our committee.
okay.
Is there a map that shows like what the underserved areas are in each community, or?
That's what we just did the bead challenge for, and it was so screwed up that nothing came from it.
Yeah, the maps themselves are based off of FCC data, and it's just like New Bedford, they're saying it's like 18 locations, and obviously, there's way more than that, and it's just the maps were, again, to Dave's point, the BEAD funding process just disaster. So we tried that same approach, and we hit a brick wall.
Yeah, I just didn't know like how, what Verizon is saying is underserved in like Dartmouth. That's what I'm kind of like
Yeah.
to figure that out.
They put it in their proprietary proposal and proposed it to MBI, and then MBI used that to make their decisions about the towns they proposed in. You know, who knows? They may have proposed for other towns and not gotten funding. Right now, my colleague, my hardworking colleague Brian, has been trying to decode very complex encoded tables that show the locations of all the underserved and unserved areas in the towns that were accepted by that arcane process, and also the community anchor institutions. We've identified what community anchor institutions we've been able in Bourne to get through the process, but it's we still don't know exactly where the residential broadband served locations are that qualify for the BEAD funding. So we shall see when that comes out. That's Bob. We've been told that that whole list has gone to NTIA, and they have the Rosetta Stone and know how to read it, but we sure don't.
Is it your feeling that the efforts that, even though the BEAD challenge process was, by all accounts, really screwed up.
Spit it out, Bob.
Okay, and then, but notwithstanding, is it your understanding that the efforts that were made by certain communities have impacted that list. In other words, communities that made no effort would not be on that list, but you know, communities that were making an effort do show up on that list from Verizon. I don't, or was Verizon's identifying of these communities completely independent of anything that any community was doing on their own?
The gap funding that they got occurred before any of the BEAD lists were put together. So that was
Right.
based on prior information.
Okay, that's right. Okay, so then, yeah, you know, just are they required to disclose the basis like MBI for how the selections were made? I mean, there must be some. It's amazing as you know, every other form of government, you know, supposed to be able to disclose this kind of information, the use of tax dollars, but okay, well, you know, so Brian's, you know, Brian's doing that. Obviously, his work is specifically for your community, not necessarily everyone else's. I don't know, maybe once, if anything develops out of that he can share with other communities that are interested,
Mhm.
maybe they can go down the same path. However, you know, whatever luck you have with that.
Well, whenever he figures out how to decode it, he's certainly going to share that information. And I mean, the file is 2 million lines long. Okay, you know, and a lot of it is for individual BSLs, broadband served locations. It's lat long.
Wow.
Okay, latitude, longitude. So God help us all.
Oh my God. Yeah. All right. Well, so Peter, you're saying that in Dartmouth, you know, everyone's a little skittish, I think is the word you use, just to because, you know, you're concerned the same thing could happen with what Falmouth's seeing in New Bedford, but you know, in a sense, you know, from a maybe from a selfish standpoint for those communities, it would be better to have another alternative rather than nothing, right? I mean, you know, it's not, but yeah, I would think at least if, you know, people would welcome having another FiOS or now, does anybody have a sense? I know you mentioned, Bob, that Wareham and other communities that have FiOS in place now. Does anyone have a sense for what the price point compared to Comcast? Is it basically the same? You just have an alternate provider?
FiOS in the new sections in Bourne is I hope it's not a loss leader, but it's $55 a month for 300 up, 300 down.
Okay.
Another
That-
member of our,
that's
sorry, you were breaking up. I thought you were done. Another
Okay.
member of our
Well,
committee
go ahead.
is the IT director for Bourne Public Schools, and they said Bourne jumped to Verizon off of Comcast because of the cost savings. He didn't give us the exact numbers, but he said there was a huge cost savings, and then also just the quality, you know, a better service.
Okay, that's the municipal IT.
He was for the Bourne Public Schools,
Oh,
so
for the schools, yeah.
yeah, for the school system, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
who is that? Is that Chris Oliver?
Yep, Chris Oliver, yep.
Is that who you're talking to?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, he's one of our board
I
members. He
wasn't
lives in
aware of
town.
that. They were on Open Cape
All right.
for a while when Open Cape got down. Again, when they crossed the canal, south of the canal, the big cluster of schools is right there, and there are a number of businesses. And originally, Open Cape had gotten enterprise service down to those. You know, $4,000 a month per user or per enterprise. You know, I wasn't aware that Verizon, that probably was the reason that Verizon served that area, because they had, you know, some big revenue that they could get with those big, with the school system, et cetera.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he
So
said
very
that he
interesting.
just switched over, and that was last week. So you can confirm with him, I'm sure.
Okay, so David.
Oh, I will. I'll give Chris a call.
And David, you're in a similar mode right now to what Dartmouth is over there in Westport, working with the Entry Point still, or?
Well, we haven't done much in the past few months. We're still hoping to find some kind of a program that will provide the funding from sources other than the town. We haven't come up with that yet. And the BEAD process turned into such a fiasco. I think we're still trying to regroup and figure out where the hell to go.
Okay.
We're kind of where 6 months ago, I was pretty hopeful that we were ready to move. We'd gotten approval in town meeting twice for our municipal light plant and, but over the past 6 months, it's been mostly treading water or drowning, one or the other.
Okay. Okay, well, for an update on what's going on in Fairhaven, we had a group working on kind of trying to follow along on the coattails of what New Bedford's doing. And we were planning to work with Serped, who had agreed to do some work for us on a consulting basis, but acknowledged that they didn't have real expertise to help us when it came to evaluating proposals. So we reached out to get a quote from a consulting firm that would help us do that once, something similar to what you saw from the Falmouth group. And, we had funding from a prior town meeting article that would have been enough to cover that. But several people in the community kind of, voiced concern about spending any more money on broadband, thinking that we were proposing a townwide municipally funded network. When that, at this point, that's not what the directive of the select board was. We got a clear mandate from the select board, similar to what Falmouth got, which was, we're not gonna go and put a municipal bond against this. So why don't you go and see if you can find something that would work otherwise. So we were going out to do something very similar to what New Bedford was planning to do. But we had requested $19,000 of the funds that had already been set aside from a prior town meeting article and not spent for this purpose. And the select board just kind of listened to the complaints from a few people in the community that night and decided not to authorize it. So we're kind of just at a standstill, and they want to take a step back and wait and see what happens in other communities. So that was kind of an unfortunate thing. And they're even the committee, the broadband study committee may even be disbanded altogether until there's some clear direction from the select board. So little unfortunate circumstances there. So, and that, that's part of the reason why I mentioned that I wanted to see if there's someone else that might be interested in kind of, taking over these meetings in terms of setting them up and getting people together. Because I don't want to be, if Fairhaven's going to kind of completely, step away from considering broadband, I'm not sure I'm the right person to kind of stay involved with this group. I don't mind doing it for a little while, but eventually it's probably makes sense for someone else. And I don't know if anyone else is interested in that right now, but if you are, let me know if you want to talk about it on the side after the meeting. Certainly that's okay too. I know someone that expressed interest in doing that when we first started meeting with Sean Gross. He's a consultant that the city of New Bedford uses. And he has attended in some of our meetings, but so I don't know if he'd still be interested in that, but I'll reach out to him to see. And otherwise, if anybody, can yourself or anybody else you can think of that might be interested in kind of keeping this going, I do think there's some value in it. I know we haven't been consistent in meeting every single month. We've had a little gap in a couple months, but I think for the most part, we've been meeting, every month or so. Let's see, someone sent, okay, I see your list of companies, Jonathan, in the chat there. Thanks for sending that. Any other thoughts that people want to, get into today?
I just had one quick question for David over at Westport. Entry Point said something about that you guys were looking to the USDA for grant.
Yes.
Do you know where that is in that process?
I don't, they were looking into it, but we didn't get any definitive answer back. I'll send out a request again. They, but it's, I don't know, I guess, what, as I was trying to say, I think we've kind of lost our momentum here, and we may need to wait until on into the first of the coming year. I kind of hope Bob help hold us together till we get past the new year, and maybe some of us will be more upbeat and ready to help pick up on it.
Yeah, I'm willing to do that, and maybe, maybe things will develop a little, sooner rather than later with New Bedford and their efforts. And seeing what might happen in Falmouth, and maybe people will learn from their experiences and see if there's something further that can do. And, there may be those other communities that were in the Verizon, on that list, the $37 million being, funded, they may have an interest in kind of joining in these discussions as well, because they can probably learn from each other with what's being proposed
Well,
in each of their communities. I don't know.
unless Verizon comes in and just kind of takes over and undercuts the municipal effort.
Well, no, I know that's not desirable in some aspects for people. I'm just saying that if that's what ends up happening, and communities end up really at that point having no choice. I mean, having a choice to go with Verizon over no alternative
Yeah,
is probably,
yeah, we have Comcast here, and they don't seem to be doing much in this area. Edgartown and Nantucket, Oak Bluffs, a few places like that, but not much here on shore, on the mainland. So they don't provide very good service anyway. So
yeah, I thought what was interesting in one of the proposals that was in the CTC report for Falmouth was that one of the developers was proposing a 50% match from the community. So it was, and allowing the community to retain ownership. So that was an interesting, I mean, for a community that says, we're not going to, in any case, we're not going to fund any amount of a municipal project, municipally owned project, and that doesn't matter. But for I thought that was an interesting concept, not having to go entirely owned by the community, and if the developer has a 50% stake and they're still willing to give you control of the network. I mean, I guess the devil's in the details, but
Bob, that company, Whip City, is willing to do that pretty much for anybody in southeastern Massachusetts. So any town that wants to entertain that, they're willing to come in and talk.
yeah,
We had talked to them, and they said they can get 3 to 4 towns in southeastern Massachusetts, at least in Westfield, near Springfield. So if they could do that, they're willing to come in, and if they can get a core going, critical mass, they can find the other 50% of the funding. They're willing to go forward with it.
so they still would, it would still be, I'm not clear on what the ownership model looked like after it's built out. Are they saying that they would own 50%, that the community would own 50%, or?
I think they had provisions for a buyout by the town over time.
Okay,
So that with revenue bonds or something like that, so that they got their investment back, and that they turned over ownership to the town, and they would be the the ISP of the operator, somebody who maintains the fiber.
Okay.
So they're very flexible in that area. They're doing that for about 20 towns in Western Massachusetts under the funding they got 10 years ago.
Yes.
And they built out entire small towns. Very capable. We had a fellow in our committee who used to work for the electrical side of the MLP in Westfield, and he said the internet people were top notch and
Yeah.
looking to grow.
Now, they're not, they wouldn't be building an open access network. It would be a single provider, that they would be a single provider like Verizon would be, or one of the other, correct?
That's my understanding, but my guess is, you know, for the right financial mix, they might be willing to do that and turn
Yeah.
over turn their system over to the town as dark fiber and let the other operators from that internet hotel up in Boston come in. There are like 50 different providers ready to go if they can get access to dark fiber.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
I guess if they're saying that they have provisions in there for the community to have a buyout after a certain number of years, certainly at that point, you could make the system an open access system, right? Because you own
Right.
it. So,
Exactly.
um,
Again, you know, I don't want to speak for Whip City, but
right.
they just seem very flexible. Bob, going forward with this committee, you know, at least in terms of our board's participation, one of the decision points for us is going to happen after we learn, you know, who gets the BEAD funding, who gets the GAP Network 2 funding, et cetera. And also, you know, what Verizon plans to do in terms of the unserved areas inside Bourne. That pretty much will determine, you know, the direction. The select board may change the charge that we have, and it might be entirely going to something like dealing with some of the multiple digital equity issues that we have in town that extend beyond connectivity.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
we can talk after. I think probably the next meeting in the beginning of next year would be when we learn about some of those grants and or lack of grants, and then all of us have to make individual and kind of collective decisions based on that.
Okay. All right. That was going to be my next question, is what does the timing look like for that? So does it make sense for us to try to, go ahead, Karen?
Oh, hi, guys. I'm from Falmouth, by the way. I don't think I know many of you guys personally, but I have attended some of these calls, and I would just comment. Two things that I wanted to offer is, first of all, I think the sharing of best practices and how people are going after grants and what they're hearing about Verizon and Comcast and stuff like that is really good. I know that you're looking for a new owner, Bob. I'm not offering to do that, but I do think that this is a very good, there's lots of little teams that are working on broadband and connectivity across the Cape and across southern Massachusetts. But I think this one particularly, you guys do a really good job of sharing information. And to me, it's a really valuable gathering. The only other thing I wanted to just point out, I mean, we've all seen these numbers for Comcast and Verizon, is that just don't forget that a lot of what they're doing and the mystery that we have to unravel as to why they're doing what, where, and how is, you know, is basically to protect their core wireless business. And I know that they're getting different SKUs with BIOS and such, but a lot of the Comcast stuff, I look at that list from, you know, Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, and those are the places where they just have crappy service to begin with, you know, just wireless service. And so just don't forget that in the mix of what their motivation is definitely taking public funding to shore up their existing businesses and stay competitive in those. So that was my only sort of comment, that when people look at this and they sort of say, wow, kind of a weird menu of places and not a lot of detail, because don't forget, they can take their wireless business and pop up, you know, fixed wireless as a proxy for a fiber broadband. So
Yeah,
just wanted to mention that.
that's a good point. And yeah, so in terms of timing, you know, if we were to meet in sometime in December, I'm not sure if there's enough value in that. And, you know, if there's, maybe we should wait and just meet in the beginning or middle of January to kind of see where people stand then, but it's up to you if people, you know, want to check in before then, or something significant. You know, of course, if something significant happens, and we circulate, you know, a message about that, we could always call a meeting. You know, there's no problem, but do people think we should try to meet in December or just wait into January?
I'd vote for January.
Me
Okay.
too.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. And say mid-January kind of time frame?
Yeah.
Like that? Okay, all right. All right, then, if there's nothing else that people want to get in tonight, we can set that up and maybe get it on people's calendars for mid-January, and we can communicate as we have in between. So appreciate everyone attending, and I'll agree to kind of stick with this through into at least the January meeting, and see how things go from there. Hoping there'll be a change.
Bob, thank you very much for your service on this. It's really
Right.
yeoman work to keep to herd the cats here.
Okay, well, that's
Second that, yes, much appreciated.
appreciate it. My efforts really are minimal, just getting people together. You guys they're really into the weeds, are bringing all the information forward. That's really great. So thanks a lot, and take it easy, everyone. Enjoy.
Have great.
Enjoy all the holiday.
Great
Thanks.
holiday. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Okay.
Okay.